It's on. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. I guess the first thing is we need to select a chair for this committee.
I would nominate Mr. Clausen.
I would second that in a heartbeat.
I hear the train wrestle. All right. Anyone else interested? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Even though we don't take a vote at committees, I guess we did today. Moving on, the financial report. And both Mr. Martin and I are going to kind of go through, for the benefit of you guys. This is something that we see every month if you've not seen it yet. Basically, what the committee has asked Alan to do is to provide us with the sales tax receipt, since that's such a large part of our revenue stream, and then how that compares to previous years and how it compares to the budget. So, as you can see, with February's receipt, we're about 4.7% ahead. Now, that's year-to-date, correct, Alan, or is that just for the month?
That's just for the month, 6.7 for the,
At the bottom.
Okay, down at the bottom, 6.9
Right.
year-to-date. And the sales tax, real estate excise tax, down at the lower left, the refunding.
and I might just add so that the new committee members would understand how this is calculated. From 2013 to 2015, it's just the average by month of what we get, and that's projected back over 20 years. So what we do is we just take what is the pattern that the city's received in sales tax, and then when we figure out the yearly amount, we apply that percentage-wise. It seems to be pretty close. We receive sales tax 60 days after it's collected. Of course, they collect it at the till, and then of course the vendor or retailer sends it to the state. It's the Department of Revenue that actually receipts it into the state treasury, and then there's a calculation, and we get our portion distributed 60 days later. We generally get it around, well, we get it the last day of the month, but we usually, somewhere depending on the month, we'll find out maybe 9 to 5 days prior. We're able to go into the website, type in our codes, and see what the distribution's going to be. Just really depends on the nature of it. And you just can see the pattern there, how it just, the percent of total is pretty much that, 5-year average. We're showing 3 years, but that's the 5-year average of collections over the period of time. And you can see February's high because, of course, that's your
December.
December retail.
right. So that's pretty typical of that, and you can see the pattern how it develops there through drops early summer, but then kind of builds too, and you kind of get a bump up when young folks go to school, and also if you look at car sales tend to
Go up in
pop up a little
October.
bit in that fall period of time when the new models come out and they discount the older models. So that's pretty much a pattern, and that's true all over the state. I don't think we're much different than anybody else. So that's how it's calculated.
And you said this 5-year average is based on 20 years worth of data.
Well, it goes back 20,
20
years.
years.
I mean, you could go back, and it's
Right.
only 5 years because you want, of course, throw out and get the new
Right.
trend. But
Okay.
it goes back a long time, and it's all pretty much within a point or two.
Do you recall when we budgeted, we took percentage over, was it last year or was it?
I did it a little bit different this year. Maybe that's why I'm so low. But I actually went back and took Conley's piece, the Puget Sound forecasters information, and really worked real hard on an Excel spreadsheet to project it out based on the fact that I was going to move to a biennial budget, and I was going to try to figure out really to dial it in. So didn't just take last year's and add it in. I did try to come up and use their numbers on trends, and I'm low. But it is over last year's.
That's what we use typically at the transit.
Right.
This last year, they were pretty close.
Right, they are, yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I tried to do it, and you'd rather be low than high. And here's the thing, typically, we don't know yet because we haven't got to that part of the annual report, which is due the last day of May to the state auditor's office. In that, we have to determine what our percentage of revenue over projection was and expenses over projection for the past biennial period, which is 12 months. So typically, we're about 2% low, but higher in revenue collections. We're around 7% under budget on most things. That tends to be kind of the pattern that the city has going. I think the under budget stuff more has to do with what we didn't get to, rather than sharpen the pencil so much. Although I think right now your managers are all real good about being fiscally conservative. You really do. So, you know, that's how that plays out. So that's how that, we'll have that number sometime probably in April to give you some idea, I hope, no later than May sometime. It's going to say here's our percentage of difference. That falls, of course, into, this is all, you know, there's two things, and I'm just trying to bring the committee up to kind of give you an idea, not to talk too much, but for example, we have a new mayor, and so I've spent quite a bit of time. I think we've had 2 or 3 good meetings on cash, and then how that plays into budget, because, you know, when you get to on my side of the equation, you end up with 2 things. You have budget, which everybody kind of focuses on, but then you still have the cash that's behind it. So I've spent some time with Rob to show him where the cash is and how it flows through here. Spent some time with him on the cash flows that we put together, and then also what's on the budget side. On the budget side, at Springbrook, all of the directors can go in and look and see what by line item, what they've spent in those line items. Quarterly, the treasurer's office prints out an actual hard copy report, which I put in their inboxes. That's pretty much just my initiative, so that I can go back and actually say, hey, did you see that? And here's the 2 or 3 things I want to ask you about, because what we're trying to do is, you know, cash flow this thing for one thing, and then, you know, have our budget be realistic. Most of the budget amendments that the treasurer is going to bring forward during the year, unless it's money that moves between funds over the amount that was originally budgeted, you really, under statute and the BARS manual, budget accounting reporting system, you really don't have to come back and do a budget amendment, because you budget by fund, not by line item. So as long as within the budget you don't go over, you really don't need to go back to the policy board. I bring those forward personally, one, so that the council is very transparent and knows exactly where it is if there's any question. And of course that resolution then leads back when I get into a situation with an auditor. If they were to say, how come this happened, I have the whole line. So it's for my administration to the end, and then the transparency of the group. But probably a quarter of the budget amendments are actually, you know, legally and regulatorily required. But it keeps everybody on the same page if you point out these changes. And as you've heard me talk about, I always think of an audience that we're talking to. There's people that are really close to this, that are very sophisticated, realize the defined terms, know how we're calculating it, and track every day. Then there's a person farther back in the pews, if you will, that aren't as sophisticated. So we're trying to talk to everybody so that they know where their money is.
When we look at this sheet, this current expense cash flow and your beginning and ending cash, that is strictly our primary budget.
Yeah, it's general.
And that has nothing to do with these REIT funds?
No, it doesn't. That's
Okay.
general fund, and we started that back in the day when we were, Rob and John will remember, you know, we were down to some real thin periods of time. Our payroll's our biggest expense each year and each month, and you know that off the top of my head, you're pushing about $300,000 now per payroll, and we pay every other week. So there's 2 months, or last year actually 3 months, where we ended up with 3 pay periods in a month. So you know, you're pushing $1 million there. So now all that comes out of the general fund, comes out of other funds as well, but a lot of those are transfers back into the general fund after we determine who we paid what.
I think one of the other issues too is, Alan mentions cash flow, was you gotta remember all those sales tax we get on a monthly basis. Property tax comes in, the bulk of it twice a year, so there's a long dry period
Right.
before
Yeah.
April.
And then if you could just help me remember, and I don't want to dwell on this, but what have we budgeted out of those REIT monies? Because I know that in our budget this year, we've taken significant REIT funds to do Bethel. And I couldn't remember because I'm looking at these and they're significant. I can't remember what we were drawing them down to.
Yeah, basically it's, capital items.
Right, no,
So it's gonna
exactly.
be the park improvements out there.
And will DeKalb Pier come out of this?
DeKalb Pier's got 82,650, and then Mark had,
40.
40, so we're gonna have to take another 40, so the total of that's gonna be about 125.
That little pocket park too over by,
Yeah. And we're half on
Hotel
that,
too,
aren't we?
right?
Yeah, 62,500 for that. A lot of that, is your portion or your match or whatever
Right.
it is, what you go to. So that's the bulk of it, those things, because it's for capital items.
Right.
Under the statute, during the financial crisis, the legislature, as you recall, Sean wasn't here, but the legislature opened up the use of REIT to maintenance. And so that sunsets at the end of this year. So we did take advantage to that to some degree, but they really want to have it be capital items. The people that care in Olympia about the real estate excise tax is the realtors, because it's a tax on their transaction. And there's a long history going back to 1935 on the real estate excise tax. First only a state tax, and then in 1951, I think it was, although I wasn't around, went into place for local governments. And for local governments, there's 2 quarter%. And both of those are used slightly different. Rob and I had a discussion last week about that. They have different constraints on them, but whenever you mess with the real estate excise tax statute, you're talking to the realtors.
And REIT 1 was a little, you can see the balances are smaller too, 1 to 2. REIT 1 is a little less restrictive than REIT 2. But it's all capital. One has components where it has to be in your comp plan, and then the other one, the REIT 2, I believe it is, you can't use it for park land acquisition. So that's why.
But how much did we take out for Bethel? It was,
It's pretty significant.
I would say it was
We're
500 or
putting-
600,000,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
we're putting $750 into Bethel this year, and I would say
Majority of it's coming out of
Yeah.
REIT.
Yeah, okay.
2/3 of it's going out of REIT.
Yeah.
because this is our last year to be able to.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I was just, I just wanted to get it clear in my head.
Speaking of REIT, I read in the paper where, you mentioned it the other day, where Gen 1 sold their interest in McCormick Woods. That's an $18 million transaction. When would we see or expect to see that?
We're talking about that Friday.
I'd asked, Deb Walker tracks all that, and she's watching for that. So we haven't seen it yet, but it's gonna be.
Noticeable.
It's collected at the county and then transferred as well to the Department of Revenue and the State Treasurer Census does, but we're watching.
Is that normally a 90-day, 30-day, 90-day?
Well, I'm not sure how many days it is, but it's a long time.
Yeah. I
I've
remember we
collected-
saw when they sold the Safeway complex in there, noticed it.
My
Well, I
history-
noticed the significant amount in December, January,
Mhm.
and,
That's driven by a couple of things. It's driven by the 13th month and how the auditor wants you to receipt in your money for, whether it's accrual or cash basis. And then the other thing is people do try to get things done by the end of the year. So there's 2 drivers to that.
yeah, because you can see that's pretty standard. And then, of course, we have nothing
Right.
in January, so.
Right, right.
I think that July number was the Safeway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the long and the short of it. you know, and we can go ahead. We have, for the first time, I waited till January. I've done everything on January 1st whenever I've changed anything around here. None of this stuff was changed. I mean, it was all improved as it went into Springbrook, let's put it that way. So now cash is in Springbrook. When I got here and up until January 1st, all of our cash was tracked on Excel spreadsheets. There was actually 7 Excel spreadsheets. And of course, that comes with its own group of, you know, situations. So anyway, we've got that into Springbrook now. And what that means is when we receive money, and so much of it now comes electronically, of course, we just go ahead and the front desk is the actual main receipt station. Has its own server, by the way, and it takes credit cards, and that's why it has its own server. That money comes in, and now they're able to code that right to the account that the cash account goes to. So now it hits cash, whereas before it was just a deposit into the city, and then we distributed the cash after the daily deposit. Now when she types it in, it goes in. So at the end of the day, if there's an error, which is very, very rare, you know that it's a receiving transaction that day on some item, so you're just looking for, you know, the item that's in the wrong spot. So I've showed that to Rob. Now it's just a printout at any time that we can do, so I'm much more comfortable with that. The cash is in 3 different places, actually. The local government investment pool, which is at the state treasurer's office, and that's an overnight liquidity pool. Then there's a portion of it that is in Kitsap Bank in a money market account of about $4 million. Plus we keep about $1.25 to $2 million in checking, depending on the cash flow at any given time. And then the rest of it's in a local government investment pool at Kitsap County. I know Shelley Pearson manages the Kitsap County pool's been doing it for, 20 years. Doug Eckstein manages the LGIP. He's been doing it since 1989. These are long-term employees. They're operated like a money market account where you put $1 in, you get $1 out. 2A7 is the federal code for that, which they're changing. They're going to change that. Don't need to take you down that rabbit hole. But anyway, that's where the money is. I did disclose all of that to Mr. Patonsu. It's broken down by fund, by cash on our books, and those 3, our banking relationship is Rob and Quebec. No, really the banking arrangement for us is the bank is our concentration account, and we account for the money. And then they don't know whose money it is. It's just green under our name, and then we account for it for the various funds.
And so within those pools of money that you talked about is our utilities, is our REIT money, is our general fund money.
Yeah.
So it's there because it's green, and then you have in-house the software, the accounting system that identifies all of it.
Right. And where that's handy is, say, the county pool right now pays the most amount of money. And so you really aren't able to send money back up the hill because they're county treasurer's ex officio treasurer for the city for collection of certain taxes. So she collects that, and their office puts it into that pool. So that's how that money builds up. Well, let's say we wanted, because that pays higher interest, all money being green, we can actually have money that was never in the county, and we can put that name on it, if you will, get the higher interest rate, and spend the money that's at the bank that's in somebody else's name. So you really don't have to move physical cash, you just do the accounting transaction. So it makes it pretty slick, really. So that, in other words, we are the treasury. They're just those pools are just the 3 concentration. We're not big enough to go out and buy securities. I mean, don't let anybody talk you into that type of thing. I mean, you'd have to get a bigger treasury, and you'd have to be earning a lot more interest to make it make sense. I mean, maybe buying some CDs or something like that at some point might do it if rates got high where you wanted to put some money away. But other than that, there's no marginal difference for what you gain. And you're not able to hold the securities anyway. You have to do a third-party agreement where you buy an agreement, they hold it for you, because they don't let the treasurer actually, you hold the account, but you don't hold the physical security. Third-party vendor has to do it. So that, you know, I can't, nobody can steal from you, and you can't steal from yourself if you want. So that's kind of the big picture.
Alrighty, why don't we move on to the information technology report. Just kind of reading through this.
The SciTel, what you have with you, and I wrote a memo here to kind of hit the highlights of what's in the SciTel report, the network report. And I was very, I think I've told you before, but not in the meeting, I was very pleased with the SciTel network assessment. They came up, they had 3 or 4 technicians, they locked into our system and they ran this Nexus report, which I learned is a standard for all computer systems like this. Nexus is a kind of an open sourced tool that runs everything and then rates it. And they ran through, so they find everything that doesn't work and any blockages or anything like that, and that's all in the report, what's failed and what's complete. So, and in talking to, I had 2 good conversations with, almost layman-like conversations with the person that led the SciTel piece. He used to do a lot of work, but now he's more on the administration side. And he said, you know, he had a technician there, but he said, I haven't been doing this for about 15 years. You know, my job's different. My job's to talk to you. And it was very well done, I thought. I said, well, I was an accountant once, and I haven't accounted for anything in years. So you know, I mean, you get away from actually doing payroll, in charge of payroll, but they won't let you get towards it. But anyway, he had the skills to really kind of walk us through that and that type of thing. So he said a couple of things. I hit the highlights in here so that we'd have something to talk about. And he said that basically he made a comment that overall the city is behind in its technology investment. That's what we learned down there. So I talked about the background and the process they went through. And but he says overall the city falls somewhere near the middle of a bell-shaped curve for cities its size and within the range of what the consultant expected to find. That's almost a quote. And what he says is, you know, cities this size are behind. And he said they really haven't put the, you know, it's changed a lot from, you know, cords to Bluetooth and that type of thing. And so you do slip behind in some of those things. So he says where you have one staff person, where you've moved from, you know, 5,500 people to 13,000 people, you know, you're going to see these kind of situations. So he wasn't outside of one issue. He said, hey, this is what you have out there. So he thinks we should do a lot, but he says, you know, there's a lot of people in the same boat, and they do this all the time and all day with people. He talked about some must-do upgrades, but he also said put your first energy into a good stuff enhancements. So there is a list that I put together that broke down from the SciTel, and starting in February I did start a process, and we've been cutting off those things, you know, checking through those things that are just labor, where Vince can go and do these things, and we can start working on these things, and there's been no cost to that. What little costs were was already covered in the budget. He, of course, he talked about the Wi-Fi in this city hall. He used when we know this, but what he said was, you know, when the Wi-Fi went in, everybody used home systems. He said most people in those days it was laptop, if anything, kind of a mobile device, and you sat, you know, the laptop idea was you sat down someplace, brought up your laptop, and you were able to log on and do your work. It never really was set up to, you know, there was no concept, he said, at the time that you were going to walk around with your laptop reading it and typing on it, or sitting someplace. Well, now we know mobile devices are what they are. And he explained it, and I think I tried to capture it there. He says of our 7 antennas in the city, they're all broadcasting on a different frequency. So what happens in this building, he says, when you walk, if you start out in planning with your Apple tablet and you log on, when you walk across, then you're on one antenna. When you walk across the hall, that's the weaker signal. So now you got the strong signal from another one. So you drop off of the other one, and now your device is madly searching for the stronger signal, which people don't understand what's happened to them. All they've done is tried to log off, and we've seen that all around there. So he said in any public building now, you really, and it's not terribly expensive, but he said you just need to go in and put in a commercial system, and what that does to you is you're on one signal band, and so once your machine captures that, as you walk around the building, it doesn't drop. And he said it'll even drop within a room as it competes for the stronger signal.
We're having out here.
Yeah. So he said that was just in a public building. He said you just have to do that. He said you've got too many people trying to do their work, both as employees and as your customers, that are getting dropped and frustrated. We've all seen that. The other thing is he talks about a color coding scheme. He talked about things like that. I've had Vince go back and start to do that. No real cost to that. There's some cable cost, but it's in his time to actually come up with an idea. He said, if you do have a problem where you have one employee, he said your cabling, schematic's good, which we have, but he said it's really, tracing wires and that type of thing. And he said your color code should match your schematic. He said that way, if you ever have anybody that has to come in here, they can look at it. And he said, where it's going to take me 4 hours to figure out just what the wires are, a good color coding, said sometimes you can cut that way down and really trying to figure out what your problem is. So we started that, which was kind of a he says the must-do high fixed priority, which was his, I think their language, is the 2003 server, which is no longer being supported by Microsoft. And he said that what that means is its security feature is not up to date. So he says we have to get rid of that and move beyond that. So that's a must-do that we'll talk about in a second. Refiguring the circular logging, we've got that corrected. What that was doing was having everything logged in every time that you touched it. It would make a new copy of that. And he said that's not the way. He said you just disable that feature. He said all you have to do is capture it once. And I'm not talking about emails. I'm talking about data in the system on a transaction. So we took care of that. The other thing is he talked about warranty coverage, and we haven't in the past used warranties, but he said in a smaller operation he felt they were your best friend, because he said it does a couple of things for you. One, it really ties into the useful life of the equipment. So when the warranty runs out, he said, where you really don't have an IT department, if you will, like a big operation, it gives the policy people some idea on, how good is their equipment. Because he said if the company isn't willing to warrant it, then you really should ask yourself, should we keep this? Because he said you might think you're saving money, but you're really not. The other thing he said on a warranty is he said they will, when you call them, if you have a problem, if it's warranty, it's their problem, rather than trying to drop down into the regular food chain. I have this piece of equipment that's not working, and what do I do about it? And you just go into their repair, phone circuit, rather than I've got a warranty number here and this thing quit working. And he said on warranties generally, he said the equipment, as it gets, there's not any cost to them to replace it. So he said they're not replacing it retail, they're replacing it wholesale. So he said generally when you have a problem, they're just going to send you the part, the new server or whatever, if it's failed, rather than sending a technician to fix it. So he was a big proponent for warranties. One, to tell you your useful life of the equipment, and two, to tie you back to the vendor in case you do have a problem, because he said you really don't have time with the staff that you have, he said, is to try to troubleshoot this stuff. He said, you really have to call them up and say it's not working. And he said, if it's not a warranty problem, he said, they're gonna get you up and running anyway, just to get you off of the, to move you along. They're gonna give you advice that you wouldn't otherwise get if it wasn't warranted. He talked about something we talked about, and that was the fire suppression system. And he spent a lot of time on that. And he didn't feel that, for the most part, that he thought we were fine, considering as long as you keep the room clean and cleaned up. He said that he said you see very few fires in a server closet. He talked about how would that start. If it starts in the equipment itself, it has to reach such a level of fire to turn off the sprinkler system. He said the equipment's probably gone. Then he said you have to ask yourself, how much money do you have in the closet and the equipment itself? He said that other fire suppression systems comes with their own peril as well. They're not perfect. He said even a fire that sets off a sprinkler alarm could already have damaged the servers and that type of thing before the water ever. He said even if it's wet, you can still retrieve information. If it's burnt up, of course, you can't. So he wasn't a big one on that at an operation our size. He said he would suggest we put money into the equipment itself. Keep your cable short. He said keep the trash out of the room and those type of things to make sure that you lower the fire. He said the only way he said in conversation, the only two places you should have an ignition source would be the light fixture. And he said, how often does that happen? Just ask yourself. And then he said the other thing would be the equipment itself. And he said you want to make sure that your cables are the shorter cables, you don't have extension cords, the electrician's got the right power going. That was his advice on that, which I thought was real interesting. I spent quite a bit of time on that.
Based on what we have in the closet, a fire might be our best friend.
Then also we talked about staffing, and he said that there was really no rule of thumb out there for how many IT. I asked him how many, how do you come up with an idea of how many people you have running something like this? And of course, he spent quite a bit of time talking about it, but he said a rule of thumb that he uses is about for each 50 employees, you need an IT person. He said, and that's for a small business. Now, he's talking a small business of 500 people, right? So, but he said you do get an economics of scale when you reach a certain level, of course. But he said you're kind of in this situation. And he talked about, how we use computers are different, how our employees are more sophisticated than they were before. We're asking our IT people to do different things. So his thought was we're probably at a point right now for about an FTE and a half. And so I spent a lot of time about that. And he said to split the duties from really a local area network person, not necessarily a manager, but a person, and then also then kind of your desktop, what I'd call the layperson, desktop person, the person that's, interacts with the staff, does the software, keeps track of, who has what on their desktops, and it sets up the new employees and that type of person. So in the report that I wrote is 2 job descriptions that separate those from what we learned, and I worked with current staff and Deb Howard and looked around and tried to come up with a realistic idea of what the city might need going forward on this. And then I took their recommendations, which as you can see are voluminous, and broke them down into 4 different categories, I think it was, with them, quick fixes, and then the 1, 2, 3 pieces, and then I wrote a plan that you can fold out there that would be the rollout for this to actually start to address some of this stuff. And then you've got the suggestion there for how you would realign this to actually put a part-time FTE and a full-time FTE to work to solve some of these problems, or address some of the issues there. I broke down the different costs there. Those haven't been bid out at all. Those are just pretty much a estimate that for policy discussion to see what you'd all like to move forward with. I wouldn't suggest going to the cloud with Springbrook till we work it through the budget process for 2017 and we look at that and see what the long-term costs are on that. It's something we don't have to do now, but he did suggest to move everything to the cloud, but that's the direction. He said most people aren't making tapes and taking down to a bank and putting it into a vault. And so
One of the items that was indicated as needing is to replace a server, and is this a virtual server for 27,000? Is that?
yeah, right. That's the must-do, and that takes us from 7 down to I think 4, and that's really would get rid of the 2003 problem. And that's on the fold-out. I think we have that started in August to start to get that in place. We could do it sooner, but yes, that would do that. The answer to that is yes.
Is that actually hardware, or
Yeah.
is it another
4.
piece?
And the virtual part is that, which I think means something different than me, an IT person. The virtual part is if any of the 4 fail, it trades off the information from the other 3.
Right. Right.
That's the virtual part. So you still need the box. As a layperson, he explained to me you still need the local area network to push this stuff out and retrieve it, and that's what you do. But he said you want to put everything on somebody contractually onto somebody else if you can today, and then rely on your warranties and manage it that way. So
But we end up with 4 boxes
mhm.
here, and we have 7 right now.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
And we would end up with 4.
And we have one up in Paulsbo that during the Coppola administration, there's a server up there that was put up there that's a backup storage, but that would go away as well. So this would clean it all up.
How much of this would we do in-house versus contract with?
Well, I figured up, all of this is $91,000. That includes the contractors to come in, and we would contract out as much work as we could to hook this stuff up, would be my suggestion. the
That's
recommendation.
eliminating that Springbrook.
Yeah, I'm not,
Yeah.
that's out of it. And then the other thing, the other ask, and this is consultant driven, if you go to a part-time person, his thought is that you'd have that part-time person on board when you have your contractors in changing these over, because then you're gonna get both of your current employee and your new employee to make these contacts and understand how this is put together. So he said you're in a good spot if you can come up with the resources to kind of bring it up all together at the same time and look at some of this stuff, and what doesn't work, throw it overboard, and what does, going forward, step off into the future. Now, on the budget part of it, we had quite a discussion during the 2016 budget whether or not we were going to put money in the budget for this. And I actually asked not to do that because I wanted to get this document together so that we actually had something. The guess is probably about $91,000, and that's just a guess. And then the other piece would be if you move to that part-time employee, then you'd have a cost as well that's in the packet as well. We did put out some feelers of was there people that would partner with us to do that. Still waiting to hear back from Westtown, but the mayor did have some discussions with other entities.
Have a lunch today.
Right.
I've got 2 more left, but
So, yeah.
so far I think we're better with our own person. I have kind of vetted the report and had IT folks, look at what we're looking at a job description, and they feel we're right where we should be on a salary and what it is we're putting together for a job description.
So that's that. If you would you know, give the nod to that. You know, go ahead and look over the report. If you have questions, get a hold of me. We can always go back to the consultant if you want a bigger discussion. What he suggests is once we make these changes, to hire them to come back and run that Nexus system again, and I would highly recommend that. That way you know that everything got done. It doesn't cost much, $1,000 or $1,200. And they would come back and run that report, so then you'd have, hey, here's where we began, here's the changes we put in place, and this is what we have today. So for a policy person, you'd have an outside person that would pass judgment on it and said, you're set up to, you know, go in the right direction for a number of years.
And I've seen bits and pieces about security. Is security addressed
It is.
with his changes? And they don't seem to have any concerns once we make these changes.
He doesn't, because we're really relying on going out through the county. And he said that the counties, you know, they didn't go and run a security feature on the county, but he said that that wouldn't be a concern for us. And there we're talking about the court and the police department is the big pieces of that. He said we're vulnerable with that 2003 to get hacked and have somebody get in there. That is a vulnerability if you said you got to do something about. Didn't mince any words on it.
So this $27,000 I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
at, that's for 4 boxes?
And the
That's
virtual server on the
extremely
other
low.
end.
I was gonna say, that seems,
For servers, that's
Yeah,
very, very
yeah,
low. So.
yeah.
Well, but they're not, you know, I haven't bid this out. I
Yeah.
asked for ballpark numbers, and that's what we have. And it might be an old number too, but I didn't bid it out.
yeah, and I don't
It
know.
seems low for one server,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, you know, because it's been years since I've done anything like that.
It's changed so much that it's
Yeah.
just like anything else. You can buy computers so cheap now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But to buy
Some parts.
one that is dedicated as a server, you're generally spending a
Right.
few bucks for it, so it,
Yeah, especially when
But
you
you're-
consider everything that it has, well, I don't know what it has to run. I just am thinking what we did at the bank, and,
Right.
you know, our main processing server was, yeah, yep,
a lot.
yeah.
Even if it's double, we have to do it.
Yeah, no, that doesn't
No,
make it,
I
I just looked at the
appreciate that.
number and thought it was low. When
That's
he
the
said
piece
there
where
was
we're
4,
where we are vulnerable.
yeah.
I'm wondering if this isn't replacing just the one box and reconfiguring our other boxes, but you know it better than I. Just, we went to virtual service at Transit, and it was a huge savings as far as reducing the number of boxes we need.
Right.
But still, those boxes are not cheap, so.
Well, there's a couple ways. So anyway, here's the report. Please look
Yeah.
it over. If
Yeah.
you have questions, we can get you to the real guy. Vis-a-vis no staff, just, I could get him on the phone if you wanted a frank conversation. If not, you know, if you want that, let me know. The other thing, what I'd like to take away from the meeting is your support to go ahead and start a process to move forward on this, to come up and start to bid it out. As I bid it out, what I would do is I'd write a resolution that laid this out. There was the, you know, there was the process, this is what we arrived at, here's what we're doing, here's what we're gonna hope to do. So I'd just have the 2-page whereases, and then in there I'll identify the actual cost, and then I'd share that with you. And then at that point, we could go to the council and say, here's a budget amendment. This would be a true budget amendment where we say, hey, we had talked about this last year, this is what our costs are gonna be, and this is what we need to do. There's plenty of resources for this in the general fund.
So you said this was about 91,000 less, or not
Not
including
including
the
us.
the Springwood?
That's
work.
correct. I just added those raw numbers up.
91,000 doesn't include the part-time employee.
Does not include the part-time employee. So right at $100,000 for our guess of this. It could be more, but,
And then the website, I know that's something that we've talked about a lot, you know, over the last couple of years. Would that be done after this, or can this be done independently and then
The web, nobody started on the website portion. The Centel study did not include website, and what you'll learn when you get involved in this is that they see, everybody, the industry sees IT as just providing the plug-in to
Right.
to the website
Right.
nowadays. So the website's gonna have to be invigorated in another forum to see what we're gonna do there. So we haven't started any initiative to do anything with that at the minute. And, you know, if somebody would like to step forward to champion that, might be the way to go, but,
They're currently hosted here, or hosted somewhere else, the website.
It's hosted somewhere else.
yeah, long-term relationship back in Minnesota or something.
Okay.
I know it's out of state.
Yeah, so,
One of the issues that we've talked about is a bit of a frustration is our abilities as outsiders, if you will, to log in and check emails efficiently. And what I've heard in years past, that part of the issues that restrict us is because of that pipe for the police department and the courts. And it has to be super secure and all that. Will any of this improvements help with that issue?
we're hoping to separate the two issues.
Wonderful. So
That's-
will
that's-
this,
That's the direction we're going.
okay,
We asked for some,
That's why I'd like to use consultants and contractors to set this up more than, I'd rather have a good system rely on some people that have seen the big picture out
Perfect.
there, that would come back and hand it to management and say, here's what you've got, and manage it from that point of view. And you'll see the org chart is that way. You know,
so now going to your new position, are you far enough along with that you have something that we can chew on and bring forward?
The job description is in the packet, and also the piece that goes with that you generally see during the budget process, where here's the cost of the new employee.
Okay, so it's in there.
That packet, that information's in there, so everything that you'd have to move forward with that would be
When
there.
would you like to be able to start moving forward on that?
Well, I know in talking to the mayor, we'd like to do it sooner rather than later.
So yesterday, so next council meeting, we should,
are you comfortable with this coming to the next council meeting, or would you prefer it go through work study and then a council meeting?
you know, I would be fine with bringing it to the council. And if they want to study it further, we can then schedule it for the next work study, but we can at least, I mean, if the committee is comfortable with it, and I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, so I'm not ready to say
Right.
yay or nay, that's the problem.
What?
Well, that's kind of what I'm feeling, is we've got a lot of
Yeah.
information here. I get this sense, you know, with head nods, that we all feel it's important,
Mhm.
but we haven't looked
Right.
at it enough. So if we were able to take it to the work study in March, I don't know how busy that agenda is.
We've got a couple presentations, and I think the county's gonna be there.
Your
We're gonna have-
UGA.
Yeah, UGA. I think there's one other one, so I mean, we can squeeze it in for sure.
I mean, that way maybe we
I mean,
could.
we're gonna spend 20 minutes or half an hour on this, whether it's at a council meeting or at a work
Right,
study. So
right.
we might, if we wanna get everybody to the same level, we might as well do it at work study and then bring it back to that next council
At the
meeting
next council meeting.
in March.
I mean,
It
I
sounds
guess
like
the
we're
only-
gonna get there at the
Yeah.
same
And that gives
time.
me another week to finish up my due diligence with other IT departments, which I've got a good sense, but it doesn't hurt to talk to everybody.
Okay.
And that way, if we got a head nod in a work study, you know, we could we'd start on the process as soon as we heard that.
Why don't we do this, and as a committee, is by the time our next council meeting, we'll have an opportunity and just check in. If there's no issues, then fine, let's move forward. If there is, then we can get back together before we go to work study, so we
Okay.
get those questions resolved.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Makes sense? Maybe you can kind of give us an update
Yes.
on your due diligence work, so, okay.
Well, thanks for your support in getting us this far. I mean, this was a good process.
Well, you know, it's always nice to have a fresh set of eyes from the outside look at what
Oh,
you're doing. 'Cause
absolutely.
sometimes you get so close to the forest.
Well, technology changes so fast,
It
unless
does.
you're in it doing it every single day, how do you keep current with it?
Yeah,
Well, one of my feelings is you don't want to be held hostage to anything. And if we're held hostages to what the city can and can't do because of the antiquated nature of our equipment, we need to do something
Yeah.
about that.
well, the security thing is
It's
really
huge.
huge, and, you know, and I have no idea how it relates to, we're now accepting credit cards to make payments and all this sort of stuff on your utility bills. I mean, that's scary when you're playing with other people's information, so.
Yeah, on the credit cards, it's on its own server that's in the treasurer's office.
And
The
I'm
physical
assuming
server.
that,
But does that have access to the world, and is it
No.
secure? Or
Well, I hope
does
so.
it, I don't know, I do too. But
I know, it's a scary
PCI
thing.
is,
Oh, I know.
it's huge,
I know.
so.
If it's 2003, it's likely not PCI compliant.
Well, if it's on that particular server, but you said it's on one that's in the treasurer's office, is that physically located in your
Mhm.
office, so,
Yeah.
okay. All
Credit
right.
card company makes sure we've got
Yeah, we do.
that compliance.
We do
Otherwise, they
run the
wouldn't let us
tests.
run the cards.
Oh, every year.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, between the Kitsap Bank and then each credit card company, we have to go. And Corey Pearson, who's a former Bank of America banker for 7 years, is really the expert in that. And she has explained it to auditor staff before on how some of this stuff works when they were really getting into it about 3 years ago. She spent some time on the phone. Is more of a technician person than, saying, well, here's how this actually works.
Right.
So we're lucky to have her. And she had her appendix out last week, unscheduled.
Hmm.
So, but she's doing fine.
You allow that to happen?
Yeah. Well, Kathy, her partner in utility billing, had it done about 6 months before.
oh, wow.
So isn't that something?
They
Yeah.
just,
Weird.
My husband, when he had his appendix out a year ago, they had actually 3 surgeries back to back with appendix in the hospital. Goes in spurts, I guess.
it's a trendy thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Biennial budgets.
Yeah, and I don't want to belittle this because this committee's talked about it a lot. Sean and Beck last, but John heard this, so it sounds like a broken record if anybody remembers what a record is. And so anyway, biennial budget, I'll mention this at the work study as well and just get the nod off. We'll do a resolution in June and we'll start to move to a biennial budget. The only thing that kind of wanted to make sure we got behind us was the labor union negotiations. It'd be nice to have that taken care of. There's adequate cash, I think, to start out a biennial budget this time. Our challenge is going to be looking in when we get into 2018 and we start to move towards Tremont. And how you're going to, come up with that, although your bulk of your cost on any of that's going to happen in 2019. Not really 2018. I mean, your real heavy construction. And your piece there is when you do it, even with grants, we pay it and they reimburse us. So you're going to have enough cash available in the street fund to flush those expenses out and pay your vendors, and then wait the period of time for the grant to be reimbursed. Heidi Draper, who has been 27-year employee with the city, is your accountant's accountant, and she loves getting the money back right away, and she's the one that does the grant. So as long as we have her and have her happy, I think we do a pretty good job of that. If in fact she were to retire, and I don't have any reason to believe that she will because her daughter just went away to WSU, then we just have to find somebody that would have that type of bulldoggedness to you, because that's a paper chase, as you can imagine, was this filled out and was that filled out, and you have this receipt. But she's really good, and her turnover is 6 weeks generally. So when she gets everything, she submits it then, and she, you know, she's the type of person that finds the grant person at the other end and makes a connection and talks to them. But that's a big piece of making this thing work because
It's
it's
huge.
cash flow.
It's huge.
Yeah, you can't hold up a payment on your vendor. That's bad. And then
Still need to make payroll.
and you still need to make payroll. So that'll be a big piece. But we had, at least the city had, when we annexed, was it Bethel, we had to pay, there was a soft landing agreement in place with the county, and we paid back quite a bit of that. Was it 75, 50, 25 over a 3-year period? So we had a good exercise in making sure we had enough, that when we received revenue, we didn't spend it, because we knew that there was going to be a payment that was going to be due. So it would be kind of an exercise somewhere like that. So that's going to be the heavy lifting on a biennial budget, and I think you'll find that you'll spend more time in your capital, in your capital budget than you will in operating. This seems to be the trend. You still have to do an annual report, so that you report to the city on an annual accounting basis. You'll still get your annual report that comes by year, and then you're required to have a mid-year review and hearing, much like the state does. The state passes its 2-year budget, then in the middle they do the supplemental budget. The supplemental budget in the off year for the state is an adjustment for the past really 6 months, because they just went into their biennial budget, and then an adjustment forward. So you end up with one real heavy lifting, and then you do the adjustment. For cities, I understand that's less of a case, because most of it's, you'll still do your budget amendments as you move along. You won't just wait till the end of the year to do your hearing. So you have a hearing process at the end of the first year that provides transparency and adjusts this budget going forward and backwards to make sure you know where you're at.
So let's talk Tremont again.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for us to pay our vendors, if we're talking $18 million, that's going to be paid over, what's the construction, 3 years?
No, your construction is, your construction shouldn't be over 24 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to be able to front a certain amount of money before our grants, before we have this delay in getting our grants.
That's exactly correct.
So we have to start saving now
You usually,
to front it.
there's about $800,000 in the street fund. We've tried to keep at least $350,000 in the street fund that is fund balance. It's not really reserve. Don't
Right.
tangle up fund balance with reserve. It's just cash in the bank. So we try to leave $350,000, and that was somewhat arbitrary back when we were really, the year that Fred Chang
Right.
pointed out and said, how did we balance the budget? Then he said, oh, look at here, you didn't put anything in the street fund. So he tumbled to that one. And so what we did is we drew down the street fund during that time, and we've tried to edge it back up, but we didn't want to go below $350,000. So you have that much in there to start with, and then you'd build on top of that. Some of it will be a cash flow basis of, when you're going to spend what when, but really, I think that from a policy point of view, you should really realize that when you're doing Tremont, that's where all your heavy lifting's going to be.
Right.
And we have some reserves too. We're our reserve policy
Yeah.
takes us to $1.4 million. I think we're north of 700,000 right now.
So that's the stabilization arrangement's the fancy term in government for the rainy day fund. And that has constraints on it within the policy, financial policy.
How might, if we have to look at taking out some bonds, how might that assist with cash flow?
Yeah, and Rob has got a meeting with Dave Tregesser and Alice Osdick. I think it's March 25th. We're going to meet for about 2 hours there, the investment banker and the bond attorney, and we're going to talk about those issues. Yes, the cash, you'll borrow the money. If you do that, you'll have that, and you'll have that in the bank, and you can use that money as well. There's what's called spin down rules because it's tax exempt, so you can't hold on to that money, or you have to start, if you earn any interest on it over and above the bond amount, you have to pay arbitrage. You gotta pay it back to the federal government. So there'll be a spin down, but we will be able to use the bond,
Cash flow.
as for, all money being green.
Right,
So that'll be part of it too. You don't wanna borrow the money till you need it.
right.
Which is kinda gonna be a question of when you're gonna need it. For example, this is different here because you're just one project, but on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, for example, there's actually 10 different bond deals on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge where the state just delivered the money on time when needed.
Right.
So there was just a large model, so when you were paying back to, well, it was called the Tacoma Bridge Builders, which was a consortium. They gave us a spend down and then we borrowed the money and just
Right.
had it in time, so we didn't borrow it. But those were zero coupon bonds, which you don't want to do because those are very expensive. But at any rate, Rob's gonna meet with them and spend a couple hours with them, and I think they'll really be able to get into some of the heavier lifting of that. And then at some point, I suppose, we've had those folks to this committee meeting before, and I guess when it comes out of Rob's meeting, Rob will make a decision to
And they are with,
D.A. Davidson,
okay,
and Alice was with Foster Pepper, but she's moved to Stradler and Company.
okay.
Just because Foster Pepper's changing up how they do a lot of land use. And her largest client was, I think, King County, which she spent most of her time building a Chinese wall between both sides of the office. And
We gotta move on, so is there anything else with the biennial? So we're talking 17-18 would be under the biennial budget.
right, now, do you want me to put this, well, you'll see the resolution come forward in June, before June 30th, that lays it out. Do you want any, I think
We've talked about it.
Yeah, do you want
Framework.
I haven't had anybody question it.
The only person that, because Sean is here, but Scott and Clancy may need to be brought up to speed.
Yeah, Scott.
The other council
Scott's aware
members
of it.
are
he
aware
likes
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said do it.
Scott's aware of it.
I'll mention it if it's all right. I can do it just conversationally to Clancy. Is that fine?
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
to bring them up to speed.
Right.
And on the bonding folks too, I think, I plan to meet with them, but until we get a little farther down the track with Tremont and we really know what the need truly is gonna be, I think that's when we bring those folks in to meet with the council or probably the work study.
Yeah, we're 2 years away from that. Really to do real heavy lifting on that. We gotta find out what we can get in grants and see what our portion has to be, because you're just gonna borrow what you need to.
Would there be any benefit to doing like the April work study and just put a 10-minute discussion on the biennial budgeting? Just
I can do that.
that way it's in the open and everybody's aware of it,
Yeah.
public's aware of it.
I'll just read this letter, rewrite the title to the council and say if there's any questions.
Okay. Committee priorities, transportation.
I guess, I put that, I worded that at least, what is it that, you all want to see from finance, I guess, is kind of going forward. If there's anything that you want to see specifically that's going to help you on the policy side make a decision, I can put it together and bring it whenever you'd like to do. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Maybe this would be a good one for the next committee, and give everybody an opportunity to think about it and come back to the next committee.
One of the big things to me you've touched on a little bit is cash flow.
Yeah.
Is what is that going to look like? And then also looking at our tip. And because Tremont isn't the only
Right.
only thing we have. And to be aware.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought too, especially on this piece on transportation. I know that so far this, we've collected $14,000 worth of transportation impact fees, for example. So, what is it that when we get into these transportation, because you're gonna want to, John, really needs to embed in here your policy that you want maintenance on these streets. Really, from finance, where is that? For your impact fees, where are those going and that type of thing. So what are those columns that you, on a policy side on transportation, do you want to start to see rather than sales tax data? What transportation dollars? I mean, do you want to know, virtually your gas tax is all being expensed out already, but, how much is that, for example, and where's that going? Of course, you have it in the book. But
Well,
what
some
do
of
you-
this too kind of ties together with the benefit district.
Yeah, and that's on our
How
April,
that-
that's on our April work
Right.
study.
Yeah, and how that kind
I
of,
think it is.
Right,
April
all of,
work.
we,
Where that
we need to
goes.
move forward on all of that.
Transportation.
Right, so the booklet here that we had last year is still relevant, of all these things, and we still continue to work through that. If I found time, I'd update it, but it's still relevant. And, and if you do the $20 car tab, I think it says in here $192,000. So those are the type of things, but I think not only is it's the collection amount, but also where are you earmarking this stuff?
Right.
And what is the realistic projection for a number of years to get some of this stuff done? So that you'll have some kind of memorialized.
Right. We don't have yet that pavement management system,
It's
so
in the
that
budget
we
this year.
know. Yeah.
Right. And that
where are
goes,
we with that, do you know?
I think it's going to council next week.
I just talked to Mark about it a week ago. I know it's in the pipeline.
and I going
It's only
back,
February, but
going back to that, Sanitel assessment, his mantra was, for a city this size, is listen to your consultants, put your consultants' advice into play, and then go back to if it doesn't work, go back to the consultant and drive them to say, where did we go wrong? He really felt that at this level, that's what we needed to be doing he said for cities our size that were successful, they tended to rely on those people and let your staff do your day-to-day work. So he was really high on that. So I thought that was interesting.
well, looking
There's
at
a little
the set eyes is always important regardless of where you look,
All
so.
right.
Matrix in your packet too for Tremont, and
Right.
where we're hoping that the piles of money are coming from.
Yeah, and that's just to start the discussion. You've seen those were what Mark had put together and we had worked off of.
Where, that's in the,
Here, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's just, and obviously we don't know those are the dollars, actual dollars we're getting, but
That kind of gives
that's
you
where we're
the-
shooting.
That's the hope.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the tree of the different buckets
Okay.
that we would be shooting for, and it's not really the number that's important, it's that's the source. Well, the numbers are important, but for these discussions, it's,
right.
Okay. So we'll have that particular item on the next committee priorities.
yeah, what you
next
want to
agenda.
see in transportation. What is it that you would be, from a policy point of view, you'd said, hey, I want it at a glance.
Okay.
So,
There.
just to give you guys an update, so we've got furniture needs throughout the building, and we've got one chair in particular that's quite bad out here, but we do have one more chair than we need. So, Mr. Clausen had me look into, I had facilities guys come and look at the chairs, and unfortunately, we thought we could just put cushions in them, but it's much more involved than that because of how they're stitched together. So I think we can, a Band-Aid on this is just we could go out and spend about $200 a chairs having cushions put in. I thought the chairs were 17 years old, and I've learned since then that the chairs are about 30 years old. And the springs and things in them are,
Actually older than that, but
yeah, they've been around longer than Mr. Clausen, so we know that. So I think they could be to the end of their useful life, I don't really want to make a budget amendment of some chairs. You know, I think buying good quality chairs like we did got us 30 years versus going and buying an Office Depot chair for $300 or $400 that, in 4 years we're having this conversation again. So I just, more than anything, we know the chairs are tired. I think we should put some money in the 2017 budget to buy some office furniture, not just in the council chambers, but throughout the building. We have some needs. So that's all that was. I just wanted to bring you up to date that we're aware of it. And unless you have serious heartburn about the chairs, I think we can wait, 10 months or a year, and first part of 2017 we'll get some different chairs in there. The next piece is I got the report from Rice Fergus Miller, or actually the proposal to do the assessment on our building. There's 3 pieces to this. One, we know we have windows that are leaking, siding that's probably bad, and problems with our roof. And so for $3,800, they will assess those 3 components and give us recommendations what we need to do to make our building watertight and get us into the future. The building's 17 years old. My concern was we button the building all up and make it nice and tight and get us years into the future. But we know, in particular, if you get on this half of the building over here, we have some what we believe are pretty serious space constraints. We didn't want to put siding and windows on the building and a new roof on it and then 2 or 3 years tear it off because we put an addition onto the building. So for $6,500, they've offered to do a space analysis of the building to make sure that we're maximizing the space to the best of its ability, and if we do have a need, to what that need is, and a component of that we'll be getting with the planning staff to look at our growth projections and where we should be with staffing 10, 15 years out, so that whatever we do, whether it's this building or building another building somewhere to house staff, that we're making proper decisions about that. There are 3 components to this. I'm proposing that we only move forward with the first 2 components, and I confirmed Friday that we can move forward with those independently and never have to do the third. But then the third step would be if we determine that we do have a space need, that they would do a conceptual design for that space, for that addition to City Hall. Yeah, but we put $30,000 or $33,000 in this year's budget for a analysis of our City Hall. So I would propose that we do the first 2 steps. If we do all 3 steps, it's $26,000 and change, so well within budget. But I'm not recommending that we do the $16,000 at this point.
But that's in the budget.
So all of it is in the budget.
It's within your authority, isn't it?
Yes.
Need our blessing?
I just wanted you to be aware.
No, I appreciate that very much, Robin. It's just, but we don't need to take this
No.
No.
any further than just thank you. And
Okay. So,
personally, I think it's a great idea. But
Okay.
thank
So
you.
it'll give us cost estimates to make the repairs, and then to determine what our future needs are.
We'll be surprised when it comes back on that space needs assessment, just the modern workplace, what it looks like versus what it looked like when this building was built with the private offices rooms. I mean, there's.
Yes.
I'd be
You're
surprised.
absolutely right. And it could be a component of, could be that in the remodel, we're removing some of these central walls, and going to more of the office style furniture that they're building over there at Watson's, where it's stations and partitions and more of an open concept to it. But that's not what we have right now. And,
Right. But that would be a lot less expensive than building a new annex.
Yes, it will, and that's what this is about, is determining how to best use the space we have
Right.
before we start
Great idea.
spending money or consider spending money on
Thank
some
you
sort of
for
addition.
sharing.
I'm done. City
Randy?
Halls.
So.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed my B. So, Can I back up for just a
Absolutely.
moment? I went from A to C. So B, I met with the folks, and Sean, you were there too, that bought the development rights up from McCormick Woods, and talking to the planning staff. We're fine in 2016, where we're gonna see our choke point. So we had a record year last year at 120 roughly housing units. They alone are gonna do 170 housing units in 2017. So I think easily we're gonna have 200 housing units. So I see in 2017, as we're going to our budget process, our choke point is gonna be in building inspection, because we're really maxed, we can get the plan review and all that done with the resources we have. It's gonna be performing on the physical building inspections. We're currently maxed out and utilizing an outside service. So just to plant a seed here, the fire department's having discussions with us as far as their plan review. And, they're looking to want us to share some of our permit funds, potentially help pay for that employee. That when we entered into our interlocal agreement with the county, this was part of that agreement, but our city was much smaller, and that activity was 20-25% of that employee. Now we're up to 80-90% of that employee's time, and the fire department's going, time out, this isn't fair. You're fully utilizing one of our employees, but we're not getting any compensation. So as we move forward with that, maybe in the short term we pay them a little something, but we may want to consider taking half of that if we're going to give them $50,000, maybe we want our own building, in addition to our building staff, inspection staff, it's going to do that plan review component too. Now, what we need to be conscious of though too is, last time we went into the economic downturn, we had a building staff of 1. If we ramp this up, we can't be afraid, as if we come down off of this this peak in the building cycle, that we've got to be able to scale it down to.
So I understand the need for someone to physically go out and do inspections. With our current staff, can we handle processing that many permits? I mean, just getting through that initial paperwork so that they can start.
A component of what we systems we put in with Quadrant is, this builder is going to have 8, 10, 12 stock plans. So up front, those plans will all be reviewed in the computer, and they'll walk up to the front counter and say, this will all be reviewed and ready to go in the queue, and they'll say, we want 3 of those and 4 of this one and 2 of this one, and they'll all already been reviewed because they're and ready to go in the queue. They just stop in, pay their fee. In talking to Nick, the choke point is going to be in the physical inspection. He believes we've got the people in place. I'm not saying that he's not going to come in the budget process and say
And we
he wants
still
more.
have
but
that part-time person, don't we? That,
we have that person. We've actually gone through a second one, and maybe that could be that hearing examiner support person that's working up at the front counter may need to turn into something more permanent. You're right, that because they're processing the paper as it's coming in the front door. So those are probably the 2 choke points. It's not I don't believe it's in the planning side.
Well, this company that bought McCormick, they said they're gonna come in at 17 with how many homes?
They're going to track D. They're going to develop themselves, and that's 170 that they plan to do immediately. They're going to sell. They're in negotiations for McCormick West, which they believe will be a more of a senior community in that aspect of it, and then that they're going to be working. Was it 2,700?
A total build out.
Yeah, total build out. They've got
doesn't mean it gets
development
built
rights.
in a year, but
Yeah.
Well, barring the economic changes, if everything went, they would, so I was trying to get a feel for, at 170 a year, is that their kind of anticipated
That's what they'll have.
multi-year plan, or with them selling a portion, there's gonna be somebody else that's gonna be
Also-
coming in?
also-
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
It would be also,
Yeah.
and they'd both be trying to.
So I think even 200 is a conservative number if they're gonna do 170.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just trying to figure out how long would it be at that level, looking out, 17.
Your crystal ball isn't any better, yeah, and that's my, that was my
Barring
comment.
any economic
Yeah.
changes.
Right.
If we ramp it up, we can't be afraid to ramp it down if the activity trails off.
But you know what was real interesting through the economic downturn, of all people, Quadrant Homes just continued to build.
They did.
I don't know what was in their
Just-
sweet tea, but they just kept
Price
going.
point,
Pricey it was.
Yeah.
they were priced right in the market.
Yeah,
And that was one of the comments that those gentlemen made, pointing out the window out at McCormick Woods and that community, that this doesn't exist anywhere else in the Puget
Is
Sound.
Quadrant the developer? No.
No. It'll be a higher end home than that.
Well, so these people that are buying it, this Eric Campbell, Jim Tosti, they're the developer. They won't be building homes.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so they'll be working, I'm sure, with your larger, your D.R. Hortons of the world, and would be my guess, that your larger home builders to actually come in and tackle the 170 units.
At 50 here and 40 there, they sell a group of lots to this developer and a group of lots to that developer.
Right.
But they saw the 170.
Going.
There's market demand.
On another issue that's kind of side issue on the transportation impact fees that we collect on those properties. You did a blended rate out there with the SEPA mitigation and then with your own impact fee. That was to be the same amount all across the city. What wasn't realized is the SEPA mitigation has a COLA in it, in that documentation. So each year that changes based on a cost of living adjustment that's embedded in that agreement. So that went up, goes up tomorrow. So anyway, you may have Nick come to you with an effort to work with Sharon Cates to take away that COLA in the SEPA mitigation.
And
And
then,
so I don't know where they're at on that, but I told him I don't have any, I have to collect it. You know how it works. So I said, if you don't want to collect it, you're going to have to get the city council to say you're not going to collect it. So that's where that's at. So if you see that, that's what he'll be talking about.
and then one last quick, I had lunch with Mayor Lent last Monday, and our planning department had already sent their planning department a letter, but I hand-delivered a copy to her just so she wasn't surprised by it. But the housing development coming up Anderson Hill for 300 houses, their staff initially said that there wasn't any traffic impacts to Port Orchard. And we're asking actually for $1,300 a house, or a menu of which road improvements do you want to make for SEPA mitigation.
Is that coming up Anderson Hill or is that off of Old Clifton?
It's off Oak Clifton,
Oak
that Campus Parkway.
That Campus Parkway, which is the road that runs parallel to the, or not parallel, but along the park.
Yeah,
It goes north off of-
Yeah.
The north end.
Yeah.
If it impacts Port Orchard.
Oh, no, significantly.
Yeah.
Significantly.
So we asked
Yeah.
them to look at it. They were using an outdated traffic report, and we asked them to use the more recent one, and pointed out that we have traffic impact fees. So we carved out the projects that are in that area, and Nick did a.
But it will impact Anderson Hill. People are gonna go,
that intersection.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If you're coming
from
16, you're going up Anderson Hill.
You're going up Anderson Hill, that's right, and that road is
Yeah.
not gonna withstand the traffic that they're gonna put on it.
That was
The
Majority
pressure.
of that is in their city though.
Right.
Oh, no,
But the
I-
intersection of will certainly are.
At
The
Oak
roundabout.
Clifton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you get if your comments or pushback from anybody in Bremerton, that's
Because they can't get out going that way, right?
Right.
So they might be able to get into there,
Right.
but when they leave, then the impact's straight into
Correct.
Port Orchard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes, Brandy.
So this is an item that was brought to the council late last year. And so this is a proposal to enter into a contract with a third party to assist with public records request. So it's just a tracking mechanism internally for staff to make sure that we're on top of all of our public disclosure requests. It will also, it'll be a website feature. It'll be like a separate portal, so when they say put in a public records request, they can also do it online. So they have these three options. One, they can put in a request. Two, they can look at their request. So we're not making CDs and that type of thing. We can just put it into the cloud and they can access it that way. And then the other one is they can do some of their own public records requests, or some document searches within whatever we put on the website, which is basically just gonna be ordinance, minutes, resolutions, those type of things, maybe some contracts. And so, it is within, the 2016 budget. I believe there was 2 questions that were asked from the council, and I think one of them was, the $1,500 to purchase our data back from them if we should no longer want to use this service. There isn't any data that I would want to purchase from them because everything that they're, it's put into a system and I can extract out into reports. So before, I mean, I'm gonna know within 30 to 60, 90 days that, hey, this isn't working, or we found a different solution, whatever it may be, and I would extract all of the data out and have it, you know, on our files before we would say we're done. So we would never go back to them and ask them for data. And I did reach out to the city of Olympia to say, you know, hey, how does that kind of work? And so she says, you set up the reports on the data that you want to get. And so this is a very detailed report that says, you know, by department, the type of request, who actually worked on it within the city, how much time they spent, how many days were open. I mean, it gives a pretty detailed report, and as long as I can extract that out, I would never need to buy the data. So in most of these reports, you can extract it out and then convert it into Excel, and you can manipulate it however you want.
Interestingly enough, though, in public records, you oftentimes have to have like the originals, like the metadata. Will a copy of whatever you get out of the system going to survive?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. If it's a network, or it's a, I don't know what you want to call it, it's a software program, the software program itself isn't a document, it's the reports that you extract out, so we would make sure we have all of that data extracted out. And that's, yeah.
Well, me,
And then I think the other question that was brought up was the rate increase. So in the contract right now, if we just do a year to year, they can go up to 8%. Through the conversations that I had with the vendor, they said historically it's about 5% is what they have been increasing on an annual basis. However, if we wanted to lock into a 3-year agreement, the first year would be that, I think it's $3,000, not counting the $1,500 one-time fee. So the first year would be $3,000, and then, so what, let's say April 1st, 2017, we would take that $3,000 at 3%, and then that would get us to 2018, and we would do another 3%, so that would be our 3 years. We would cap it at up to 3%, I think is what we said.
so 3,000 plus the 3%.
Correct. And I would make sure that, you know, if this proposal moves forward, that I would make sure that I budgeted appropriately for that cost increase. And I would just be a big proponent of this, obviously. So just kind of let you know where we're at in 2016. We've already had 33 public records requests, and we're not even 2 full months. Well, as of today, we've got 2 months. And we've spent almost 2,000 hours. My staff has spent about, well, and some of planning and public works has spent about 2,000 hours already responding to a public disclosure request. In 2015, we didn't hit.
2,000 hours?
Yeah.
In 2 months?
Oh, I have to, maybe it's, I'll double check my math. Staff time spent, I'll have to double check and see if that's in minutes, now that I'm thinking about it, but
Yeah, because
I thought I had everything converted into.
that's a lot of time.
Yeah,
Be 5 full-time employees for 2 months.
yeah, oh, minutes, okay, my bad. I'll have to double check, make sure that's minutes. But, so we've had that, and typically we don't hit 30 requests until the end of the 3rd month, so the trend is going
Upward.
up. Last year, we closed out at 134 public records requests. That's just from finance, admin, public works, and DCD. And then the police last year ended up with 115. So, yeah, so anything that we can do to streamline, the more we get on the website, the more when you go and click into that portal, you can queue up questions in advance and say if somebody types any word that has the word budget, it'll automatically populate, oh, you're looking for the budget, and it'll direct them to that portion of the website without them putting in a public records request. Same with, we can put
Minutes.
in, we can put in committee agendas, we can put whatever keywords that we want to direct them to that portion of where it's at on our website, and it doesn't come into us and impact us as a public records request. So, and then as you know that I'm the only one that's trained in public disclosure requests in our departments right now. I suspect it's probably going to take Janine about 6 months to get up to speed. So if I can get some sort of tracking tool, that would help. And I know that a couple weeks ago, gosh, I think it was like 2 days after Rhiannon had left, I received 6 public records requests in one day, and I'm like, ah! So, needless to say, I have 2 of them to get done today, and I will be down to 1, so.
Where are you replacing Janine's position?
What was that?
She starts next week.
Yeah, she starts Wednesday, next week, so I've got another week.
Okay, you got
75
anything from us?
applicants for that position up front.
So if the committee is supportive, then I would bring it hopefully to next week's regular council meeting contract for approval. I did take the current contract that you guys have a copy of, vetted it through our current legal counsel. She has no concerns with the current contract.
Are you all right?
Yeah, good.
And do you prefer this on consent agenda or business item?
Well, since it was an issue, I think it should
Business.
be on the business item. Anyway, if anybody wants to talk about it. Next meeting. Folks, usually we have
Mondays.
done it towards the latter part of the month. Just, you get your sales tax report around, what, the
5th, around the 25th,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
28th then?
Works for me. That work for you guys?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Is the committee interested in moving forward with a 3-year proposal, or just the 1 year and then see how it goes after the 1 year and then entertain a 3-year?
And then a 30-day out, didn't it? I thought that's.
I thought it was 2, and if it's a 30-day out, 3 years is fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we looking at 7:30 again in the AM?
That was all right.
$60-day out.
60-day.
It's fine. Take that long to export everything that to be done anyway.
Your work, Ari?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, anything for do the order? Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Welcome to my world.
We are good.
World of finance.